There was once a boy named Ammon who lived in a broken house at the edge of a crowded city. The roof leaked during the rains, the walls were cracked, and the single window barely let in any light. He had no toys, no gadgets, no new clothes. His slippers were torn. His school bag was stitched and restitched so many times it no longer had a brand name. But his eyes always sparkled, not because life was easy, but because he believed that kindness didn't need riches, it only needed heart. Ammon lived with his mother, who worked as a domestic helper in 4 houses. She left early in the morning and returned after sunset. They didn't have a father. No one knew where he had gone. Some said he abandoned them. Others said he died in a faraway village. A man never asked. He had grown used to not having answers. Despite everything, he went to school every day, not because he loved studying, but because he knew his mother worked hard so he could have a chance. He would sit quietly in class, often hungry, sometimes sleepy, but never complaining. His classmates never noticed him much. He didn't stand out. He didn't own fancy stationery or bring exciting lunch boxes. Some laughed at his old clothes, others ignored him, but Ammon smiled anyway. One winter morning, the school announced a donation drive. Students were asked to bring clothes, blankets, food, anything they could, for children living in shelters. The teacher said, "It's not about how much you give, it's about sharing what you can." That evening, Ammon went home and sat quietly in a corner. He looked around their small room. There wasn't much, just a mat to sleep on, a steel trunk, and a blanket his mother wrapped around both of them at night. He thought about the children in the shelters. He imagined them shivering in the cold. He knew that feeling. He had felt it many nights when the wind crept through the cracks in the wall. His mother came home, tired as always. Ammon looked at her and asked, "Ma, can we give something for the school drive?" She smiled gently, touched his head, and said, "Beta, we don't have much to give, but you can draw them something. Make a nice card. That will mean something too." Ammon nodded, but deep down, he wanted to give more. He wanted to do something that mattered. That night, while his mother slept, he quietly got up, opened the steel trunk, and pulled out their blanket. He folded it carefully, placed it in a plastic bag, and wrote a small note on top, "For someone who needs it more than me." The next day, he went to school and stood in the long line of students carrying boxes and bags. Some brought food packets. Others brought toys, sweaters, old books. When it was his turn, he handed the plastic bag to the teacher. She looked inside and paused. "Ammon," she said softly, "this is your only blanket, isn't it?" He looked down and nodded. "It's okay, ma'am," he whispered. "We can manage." The teacher didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. She gently placed the bag in the donation box and let him go. That moment stayed with her forever. The next few days were colder than usual. Ammon didn't have the blanket anymore. At night, he curled up tightly, using an old shawl his mother had stitched from old sorrows. He didn't complain. When his mother asked, he just said, "I'm okay." A week later, the principal called him to the office. Ammon thought he had done something wrong, but when he entered, he saw a man in a suit standing there. The man smiled and said, "You're a man." He nodded, nervous. The man knelt down and said, "I work for an NGO. Your teacher told us about your donation. I came here because I wanted to meet you." Ammon didn't understand why it was such a big deal. He just nodded again. The man continued, "Most people give from their extra. You gave from your need. That is something rare." He placed a small box on the table. Inside was a brand new winter jacket, gloves, socks, and a thick blanket. "This is for you," he said. "And there's more." Ammon looked confused. The principal smiled and added, "This NGO wants to sponsor your education. You'll no longer have to worry about school fees, books, or uniforms. They'll take care of it all." For the first time in his life, Ammon didn't know how to react. He just stood there, frozen. Then he whispered, "Thank you." The man shook his head and said, "No, thank you." News of Ammon's act spread. People from the neighborhood came to their house. Some brought food. Others gave old clothes. One even offered his mother a better job. All because a small boy who had nothing chose to give everything. Years passed. Ammon grew up. He studied hard, finished school, got a scholarship, went to college, and eventually became a teacher. Not just any teacher, but one who always reminded his students that kindness isn't measured by how much you give, but by how much love you put into giving. Whenever new students joined his class, he told them the story of a boy who didn't wait to be rich, a boy who didn't wait to have more, a boy who had nothing but gave everything. And every time he told that story, his eyes soft, because that boy was him. Armin never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the nights without warmth or the days without food. But he also never forgot the power of a small act, a single blanket, a single choice, a heart full of giving. He taught others to give not just things, but time, attention, care, and hope. Because sometimes the richest hearts live in the poorest homes, and sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest love. Hammond's story reminds us that you don't need to have a lot to give. You just need to care enough. And in a world full of noise and greed, his quiet act of selflessness spoke louder than 1,000 speeches. He had nothing, but he gave everything. And in doing so, he became everything.